You know, when you stand next to a commercial semi-truck,
Oh, yeah.
like an 80,000-pound machine just idling at a truck stop, there is this undeniable expectation of, well, monumental engineering.
Right. You look at the massive engine block, the reinforced axles.
Exactly. The sheer physical scale of the thing, it just all makes intuitive sense.
It's very tangible.
Yeah, it's big, it's heavy, and it obviously requires a highly visible, highly physical kind of complexity to keep it moving safely down the interstate.
Right. It is a very physical reality. I mean, you can kick the tires, you can measure the tread depth, you can, physically inspect the brake lines.
But then you step into the regulatory world that actually gives that truck the legal authority to be on the road in the first place.
Which is completely different.
Totally. Specifically, we're talking about the world of commercial motor carrier drug and alcohol programs.
Right.
And suddenly, the scale completely flips. You know, you are no longer looking at massive machinery or heavy steel.
No, you're really not.
You are looking at a diagnostic and procedural landscape that hinges on, like, incredibly tiny, almost invisible details.
It is the ultimate hidden architecture of the transportation industry.
Yeah.
The things you cannot physically see, the paperwork, the protocols, the chains of custody, those are what actually hold the entire operation together.
Right.
And if that invisible architecture cracks, well, the physical truck stops moving. The liability becomes existential.
It really does. And if you are running a fleet, if you are a safety manager or a dispatch director listening to this deep dive right now, that hidden architecture is exactly what we are tearing into today.
It's vital stuff.
Because our source material today is an educational guide breaking down a single, incredibly short sentence in the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulations.
That's one sentence.
Yep. We are talking about Title 49, Code of Federal Regulations, Section 382.105.
Which is perhaps one of the most consequential single sentences in the entire regulatory framework.
Okay, let's unpack this because the brevity is just wild.
It really is.
This one sentence essentially just says that when an employer conducts a Part 382 test, they must follow Part 40 procedures.
That's the whole concept.
Right. It feels like a footnote. It feels like a throwaway line you would just skim past while looking for the quote-unquote real rules.
But treating that single sentence as just some, minor administrative detail is a guaranteed way to bankrupt a motor carrier.
Oh, bankrupt.
Honestly, yes. The brevity is what makes it so dangerous. To really understand the gravity with that one sentence, you have to look at the massive regulatory volumes it connects.
Right.
Part 382 and Part 40 are two completely distinct pillars of federal law, and they perform entirely different jobs for a trucking company.
So how do they break down?
Well, think of Part 382 as the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration's specific rulebook for the trucking industry.
Okay.
It answers the fundamental structural questions: the who, the what, the when, and the consequences.
So it dictates, like, that a driver operating a commercial motor vehicle requiring a CDL needs to be in the testing pool.
Correct. Part 382 dictates exactly who needs to be tested. It dictates what conduct is prohibited, like, possessing alcohol while on duty.
Got it.
It tells you exactly when you must conduct a random test, a pre-employment test, or a post-accident test. And it outlines the consequences if a violation occurs.
So it is the framework of the program itself.
Exactly.
It's the what we are doing and why we are doing it manual.
Yeah, but Part 40 is the Department of Transportation's overarching procedural rulebook. And it applies across multiple transportation modes, not just trucking.
Oh, interesting.
Right. Part 40 is the how. It dictates the microscopic details of how the test must be collected.
Like the actual physical collection.
Yes, how the specimen is physically secured in the bathroom, how the tamper-evident tape is applied,
Wow.
how the lab analyzes the metabolites, how the medical review is conducted, and how the data is securely transmitted.
Okay, let me try to visualize this. It feels like the relationship between the software running on your computer and the user interface you actually click on.
Well, that's a good way to look at it.
Right. So Part 382 is the user interface. It's the dashboard telling the fleet manager, hey, it's time to send this driver for a random drug test.
Yes.
But Part 40 is the back-end code. It's the incredibly dense, complex programming running in the background. And if there is a bug in the back-end code, if Part 40 is broken, the entire application crashes.
Exactly.
The Part 382 test basically becomes invalid.
That is a highly accurate way to look at it. You cannot just look at a piece of paper from a local strip mall clinic, see the word negative, declare the test DOT compliant, and assume you are legally protected.
Right, because of the back-end code.
Exactly. If the how the Part 40 procedure is broken, the what doesn't matter. The test does not legally exist as a DOT test, and your company is entirely exposed.
Which perfectly sets up the reality of how this actually plays out in the trenches.
It gets messy.
Oh, absolutely. Because let's look at the reality of a busy trucking terminal. If you are managing a motor carrier, you're not standing in the bathroom at the urgent care clinic holding the plastic cup.
No, you're definitely not.
You are in a laboratory in a white coat running gas chromatography on a urine sample. You're hiring third parties to do this heavy lifting.
Right, the service agents.
Yeah. And our sources point out that this reliance on vendors creates arguably the biggest liability trap in the entire industry, the myth of outsourcing compliance.
The source text is unequivocal on this point. The regulations fully recognize that motor carriers are not medical laboratories.
Sure.
You have to use service agents. We are talking about consortium third-party administrators, often called CTPAs, as well as the physical collection sites, the laboratories, and the medical review officers.
The whole network.
Exactly. But the rule establishes a very harsh reality for you as a manager. You can outsource the physical tasks to these agents, but you absolutely cannot outsource your regulatory responsibility.
Wait, hold on. I need to push back on the logic of that for a second.
Go ahead.
If I am running a logistics company, right, and I am paying a massive premium like thousands of dollars a month for a highly respected gold standard CTPA to manage my drug and alcohol program,
Right.
why am I still on the hook if they mess up? I mean, isn't the entire point of outsourcing to transfer that liability to the experts? I'm paying them to be the experts, so I don't have to be.
It is an entirely logical assumption in almost any other area of business.
Right.
I mean, if you hire a landscaping company and they break a window, the landscaping company is liable.
Exactly.
But the Department of Transportation does not regulate the local urgent care clinic down the street. They do not directly regulate the CTPA in the same structural way they regulate the motor carrier.
Oh, I see.
The DOT regulates you, the employer who holds the operating authority to put that 80,000-pound truck on the public highway.
So they basically just need a single throat to choke.
That's exactly it. They need a single point of ultimate accountability.
Wow. Okay.
Let's walk through a very common scenario based on the case studies in our materials.
Let's hear it.
A motor carrier assumes their CTPA is handling every single compliance detail perfectly. The carrier just receives the monthly invoice and pays it. They feel totally secure.
Right. Out of sight, out of mind.
Then an FMCSA auditor walks into the carrier's office for a compliance review.
Oh.
The auditor pulls the drug testing files and discovers that the local collection site the vendor used has been utilizing an improper form for the last 6 months.
Yikes.
Or worse, the clinic hired a new technician who completely lacks the specific DOT qualification training required by Part 40.
Oh, wow. So when the auditor puts that file on my desk, I can't just point at the phone and say, hey, talk to my vendor. They're the ones who contracted that clinic.
You can try, but the auditor will point directly back to Part 40, which expressly keeps the legal responsibility with the employer. The regulations do not care what your vendor contract says. You, the motor carrier, violate the regulations if your service agent performs a DOT testing function incorrectly.
That is terrifying.
It is a massive wake-up call for a lot of managers.
I mean, it means I am legally responsible for the competence of some 22-year-old medical assistant working the Tuesday night shift at a walk-in clinic 3 states away.
Yes.
Just because my driver happened to stop there for a post-accident test.
That is exactly what it means. And this is why Section 382.105 forces you to manage your testing program as a true active compliance program, not a passive vendor relationship.
You really have to stay on top of them.
You have to actively verify your network. You have to ask your CTPA hard questions about how they audit their collection sites.
Which brings us to a really specific internal role mentioned in the text that you cannot outsource, right? No matter how much you pay a vendor, the DER, or Designated Employer Representative.
Yes, the DER is the absolute linchpin of your internal compliance.
Okay, so who are they?
This is the designated person or people inside your company who receive the highly sensitive test results from the medical review officer or the CTPA.
And what's their main job?
Their primary function is to take immediate, definitive action to remove a driver from safety-sensitive duties if they test positive or refuse a test.
And the rules are incredibly strict that a service agent cannot act as your DER, right? Like the CTPA can't just do it for you.
Correct. The DER must be a direct employee of the employer. You cannot hire an outside consultant to be the person who officially receives the results and makes the operational decision to pull a driver off the board.
So if you are running a fleet, you need to know exactly who in your building holds that specific title.
Absolutely.
It cannot just be some generic, safety@truckingcompany.com email inbox that 5 different people check whenever they get around to it.
No, it has to be a specific, highly trained employee.
Right.
And it has to be a secure, direct line of communication.
All right.
Think about the mechanics of a positive test.
Okay.
A driver is out on the road, they take a random test. 2 days later, the lab confirms it is positive for amphetamines, and the medical review officer verifies it. That MRO needs to reach the DR immediately. If there is a breakdown in that communication, if the MRO is calling a general dispatch line and leaving messages, or if the internal DER is on vacation and hasn't designated a backup,
Oh, man.
that driver is still behind the wheel of a commercial vehicle while legally disqualified.
And if that driver gets into an accident during that communication delay.
It is a catastrophic failure.
Yeah.
The liability falls squarely on the motor carrier for failing to have an available functioning DER as required by the regulations.
Okay, so we've firmly established that the employer is ultimately holding the bag.
Always.
The buck stops at the motor carrier. So if the CTPA is a massive blind spot, what happens when a carrier tries to take things into their own hands and actually expand their safety protocols?
This is a tricky area.
Right, because our sources highlight a massive area where employers accidentally break federal law while genuinely trying to do the right thing.
You are talking about the strict wall between DOT and non-DOT testing.
Yes.
This is where corporate ambition collides with federal procedure.
Exactly. Here's where it gets really interesting. You can easily imagine a safety-conscious trucking company saying, you know what, the standard DOT 5-panel drug test is great, but we care about safety so much that we want a zero-tolerance policy that goes further.
A very common corporate mindset.
Right. They might say, we want to test our drivers for a wider range of synthetic prescription painkillers, or maybe certain barbiturates that aren't on the federal panel.
Right.
And on a corporate level, that sounds fantastic. It sounds like you are being proactive.
It does.
But how does that blow up in a manager's face when they actually try to execute it on the ground?
It blows up because the company tries to be efficient. And in the world of federal drug testing, efficiency often breeds contamination.
Okay, unpack that. Contamination how?
Well, Part 40 requires DOT tests to remain completely, physically, and administratively separate from non-DOT tests.
Let's paint a picture of how this mistake happens.
Okay.
A carrier has this broad, strict company policy. They send a driver into a clinic for their required DOT random test.
Right.
And the dispatcher tells the clinic, hey, while you have the driver there and while you already have the DOT urine specimen, just go ahead and run our extended company drug panel on that same sample.
Which, to a busy manager or a dispatcher trying to get a driver back on the road, seems like basic common sense.
Totally.
I mean, why make the driver sit in the waiting room and provide a second specimen an hour later?
Right. We already have the cup, just test it for everything.
But legally, that is a disaster.
Really?
Yes, you absolutely cannot use a DOT specimen to add a company-specific drug panel.
Wow.
DOT testing is a federally mandated process with very specific, constitutionally tested procedural protections for the driver.
Okay.
It is limited strictly to the drugs specified by the federal government.
Yeah.
If you instruct a lab to look for non-DOT substances in a DOT specimen, you have fundamentally altered and contaminated the federal testing process.
Okay, I think I get it. It's like taking a highly regulated federal document, let's say your official federal tax return, and stapling your kid's 3rd grade math homework to it, and then expecting the IRS to grade both and process your refund.
That is a phenomenal analogy.
Right. You haven't just submitted extra paperwork. You have invalidated the official federal document by tampering with its required format.
Exactly. You have breached the integrity of the federal system, and this separation applies to the paperwork as well. You cannot repurpose the specific federal forms, the Federal Custody and Control Form, or CCF for your internal non-DOT tests.
So what happens when the results of these 2 different tests conflict? Let's say a company does it right. They do the DOT test, the driver waits, and then they do a completely separate non-DOT test for the company policy.
This is perhaps the most dangerous trap for management.
Oh, boy.
Let's say the non-DOT test, maybe it was a rapid cup test done at the terminal, comes back negative. The driver looks clean.
Okay, so far so good.
But the official DOT test, which went to a federal lab, comes back 3 days later as a verified positive.
Oh.
Management cannot look at that verified DOT positive and say, well, our company test was negative, so we're going to use that to excuse or override the DOT result.
Is that the federal result is the supreme law of the land?
It is absolute. A negative non-DOT result can never, ever erase, excuse, or mitigate a verified DOT positive result.
Wow. Okay.
If you want extra testing for your company policy, you must run an entirely parallel universe. Separate authorizations, separate collections, separate specimens, separate forms, separate lab analysis.
A completely different track?
Yes. The wall between the federal mandate and the corporate policy must be impenetrable.
So since we've established that the DOT test exists in this highly protected, segregated federal bubble, let's follow the actual pipeline of a true DOT test.
Let's do it.
Let's look at the procedural back-end code of Part 40 and see where it really shows its teeth, because it all starts with the paperwork, which the source text emphasizes is not just administrative busy work.
No, it is the legal foundation of the entire process. We are talking about the Federal Drug Testing Custody and Control Form, the CCF.
The CCF.
Right. This document is the legal chain of custody. Its sole purpose is to track the physical specimen from the exact moment it leaves the driver's body to the exact moment the laboratory destroys it weeks later.
Our sources note that using an expired or non-federal CCF isn't just a harmless typo.
It's really not.
So if I'm auditing my files and I see a clinic used a generic medical form instead of the federal form, what does that actually mean?
It means the federal chain of custody has been broken.
Just from using the wrong piece of paper?
Yes. If a clinic uses a generic non-DOT form for a DOT collection, they are not utilizing the required protocols. Depending on the exact nature of the paperwork error, it can be a fatal flaw that directly forces the test to be canceled.
Wow.
As a manager, you or your DER have to audit this. When the paperwork comes back from your network of clinics, you have to verify that it is the official federal CCF correctly filled out.
Which brings us to the actual human beings filling out that form.
Right, the collectors.
I think there is a massive unspoken assumption among trucking managers that if a person is wearing medical scrubs in a clinic, they are qualified to do anything requested of them.
Oh, absolutely.
Like they take blood, they do x-rays, they take blood pressure. Obviously, they're qualified to watch a guy pee in a plastic cup.
And relying on that assumption is exactly how motor carriers fail federal audits.
Really?
Yes. The physical act of collecting urine might seem simple, but the regulatory procedure is not. Part 40 dictates that urine and oral fluid collectors must meet highly specific, federally mandated training and qualification standards.
So what does that training actually look like? Are they just like watching a 10-minute video in the break room?
Not if it's done legally. They have to undergo basic knowledge training on the Part 40 regulations themselves.
Right.
They have to understand the specific steps of the collection process.
Yeah.
And crucially, they have to complete specialized error correction training and proficiency training.
Wait, proficiency training, meaning they have to physically prove they know how to do it.
No. Yes. They have to perform a series of consecutive, error-free mock collections under the supervision of a qualified monitor.
Oh, wow. I had no idea.
They have to demonstrate they can handle the exact DOT procedures flawlessly, including how to handle a situation where a driver tries to tamper with the specimen.
So if a dispatcher sends a driver to a new occupational health clinic that just opened near the highway, and that clinic mainly does general pre-employment drug testing for local retail stores,
there's a very high chance those collectors have not completed their specific Part 40 DOT qualifications.
a very high chance.
Exactly. And if an unqualified collector performs a DOT test on your driver, that test is legally vulnerable.
Because it violates Part 40.
Right. It is a violation of the regulations. And remember what we established at the beginning. You, the employer, are responsible for ensuring your service agents meet these qualifications.
Okay, let's assume the collector is fully qualified.
Okay.
They bag the specimen, they seal it with the tamper-evident tape on the CCF, the driver initials the seal, and it gets shipped off to the lab.
Standard procedure.
Now, the lab has to be certified by the Department of Health and Human Services, HHS. But here is the critical part of the process, and I want every fleet manager listening to really visualize this pipeline.
It's important.
The HHS laboratory does not just send a raw positive result back to the trucking company dispatcher.
No, they absolutely do not. And this is where the system's checks and balances really shine to protect the driver. Enter the medical review officer or the MRO.
Okay, let me try an analogy here to see if I have the mechanics of this right.
Go for it.
Let's say the raw lab data, the chemical analysis that comes out of the machine saying, hey, we found opioid metabolites in this urine sample. Let's call that raw data a suspect.
Okay, a
The
suspect.
HHS laboratory is basically just the police officer arresting the suspect and bringing them into the station.
Right.
But you, the motor carrier manager, cannot just play vigilante and fire the driver based on that arrest, because
Yeah.
the MRO is the judge.
That is a very precise way to map the relationship. The MRO is the independent, impartial medical gatekeeper of the entire system.
So they aren't just an HR person.
Oh, no. Part 40 requires this person to be a licensed physician with specific knowledge of substance abuse disorders. They do not just rubber stamp the lab result.
They act as an appellate court for the drug testing process.
Yeah.
So what are they actually looking for?
First, they look at the paperwork. They review the CCF to ensure no fatal flaws occurred at the collection site or at the lab that would compromise the legal integrity of the specimen.
Checking for procedural errors.
Exactly. But most importantly, if the lab reports a non-negative result, the MRO must directly interview the driver.
Oh, they actually talk to them.
Yes, they have to determine if there is a legitimate, verifiable medical explanation for that positive chemical result.
Like a valid prescription.
Exactly. Let's say your driver had a severe root canal over the weekend
Right.
and was legally prescribed a painkiller.
Right.
They take it as directed. They get pulled for a random DOT test on Tuesday. The raw lab result will absolutely show up as positive for opioids. The machine doesn't know about the root canal.
So the lab sends that positive result to the MRO.
Yes. The MRO then contacts the driver and says, "We have a positive lab result for opioids. Do you have a medical explanation?"
And the driver says, yes, here's my dentist.
Right. The driver provides the prescription information and the pharmacy details. The MRO verifies that the prescription is legitimate, that it belongs to the driver, and that it was dispensed concurrently with the test.
And if it all checks out.
If it is a legally valid medical explanation, the MRO will downgrade that positive lab result and report the final DOT test result to the employer as a negative.
As a negative.
Correct.
Which leads right into one of the most dangerous traps for a manager acting like a vigilante.
You have to be so careful.
You cannot take action on a raw lab finding before the MRO process is entirely complete.
You cannot. And this happens more often than you would think with modern technology.
Wait, really? How so?
Well, many motor carriers use vendor portals or software dashboards provided by their CPPA to track testing status. Sometimes, a portal might show that a specimen is in process, or might inadvertently display a preliminary, unverified lab status before the MRO has completed their review.
Oh, I see where this is going.
If a safety manager looks at that dashboard, sees a preliminary positive, and immediately pulls that driver off a load or terminates them based solely on that unverified data,
They just stepped on a landmine.
they have just violated federal regulations.
Because they denied the driver their procedural right to the MRO review.
Precisely. And in doing so, they have likely opened the motor carrier up to a massive employment lawsuit because they acted without regulatory authority.
Wow.
The employer is only authorized to act on the verified, final result transmitted by the medical review officer, not on raw scientific data.
Okay, so that is the ideal functioning pipeline. The driver goes in, the qualified collector does their job flawlessly, the HHS lab runs the test, the MRO reviews it impartially, and the DER gets the final verified result.
Smooth sailing.
Right, smooth sailing. But let's pivot to what happens when reality breaks down.
It always does.
It really does. What happens when things go spectacularly wrong on the ground? Because dealing with human beings in a high-stress testing environment is just messy. Let's talk about navigating real-time crises at the clinic.
This is where fleet managers truly earn their paychecks.
I bet.
The regulations concerning refusals and tampering are incredibly detailed, and they require decisive, informed action from the motor carrier in real time.
Let's walk through a specific scenario based on the tampering examples in the text.
Okay.
A veteran driver goes into the clinic bathroom for a random test. They come out and they hand the collector a plastic cup of urine. But the collector checks the temperature strip on the side of the cup, and it is completely out of range.
It's room temperature.
Right. Or maybe the collector notices the specimen is bright neon green, or it smells strongly of bleach.
These are classic signs of an altered or substituted specimen. So what happens next?
Well, instinct tells me the clinic would just mark the test as a fail or a positive.
And that instinct would be wrong under Part 40. Yes. A clinic cannot just invent a disciplinary procedure on the fly, and they certainly cannot declare the test positive.
Why not?
A positive test is a strictly scientific determination made by an HHS-certified laboratory analyzing chemical metabolites. An out-of-range temperature or a weird smell is a physical procedural issue at the collection site.
So what does the procedural back-end code Part 40 dictate the collector must do in that exact moment?
Part 40 has very specific aggressive recollection rules for this scenario. If the temperature is out of range or there are clear signs of tampering, the collector must immediately conduct a second collection under direct observation.
Direct observation, meaning someone is physically watching.
Yes, it means a collector or an observer of the same gender as the driver must accompany the driver into the restroom and actually watch the urine leave the driver's body and go into the collection cup.
Whoa, that is intense.
It is a highly invasive procedure, but it is federally mandated when tampering is suspected to ensure the integrity of the second specimen.
And are there any alternatives?
Alternatively, depending on the specific circumstances and what is authorized under the employer's program and current DOT agency regulations, it might trigger an authorized oral fluid collection, which is inherently observed.
Okay, and as a manager, your internal DER needs to understand exactly what is happening in real time.
Absolutely.
Because if the clinic calls the dispatcher and says, the temperature is cold, we're going to do an observed collection, the dispatcher can't panic and say, no, no, don't do that. Just send him back to work.
Exactly. You have to ensure the clinic is following Part 40, not just winging it or bending to the carrier's schedule.
So the DER must support the collector in enforcing the regulation.
Right. But let's look at a more common and often much more confusing scenario for managers.
Let's hear it.
A driver reports to the clinic for a required DOT random test. The clinic is backed up. After waiting in the lobby for an hour, the driver walks up to the receptionist and says, look, I don't have time for this. I have a hot load of perishable goods to deliver in 3 hours. And they just walk out the front door before the testing process is complete.
I can totally see that happening. So I'm sitting at the dispatch desk, and I get a call from the clinic saying, hey, your driver just left.
Yep.
A lot of managers, especially if they're under immense logistical pressure, might just think, okay, he's being a jerk. I'll write him up for an attendance issue, let him deliver the load, and we'll reschedule the test for tomorrow morning.
And treating that as a routine HR attendance issue would be a catastrophic regulatory failure.
Catastrophic.
Yes. Under Part 40, leaving the collection site before the testing process is complete, once that process is commenced, constitutes a refusal to test.
And what does a refusal actually mean for the driver?
A refusal carries the exact same legal weight and regulatory consequences as a verified positive drug test.
Wow.
The driver is immediately disqualified. They must be immediately removed from all safety-sensitive functions, meaning they cannot drive that truck, and they must go through the extensive DOT return-to-duty process with a substance abuse professional before they can ever drive commercially again.
But this raises a really critical question about authority. Who actually pulls the trigger and officially declares it a federal refusal? Is it the person at the front desk of the clinic who watched the driver walk out? Do they log into a DOT database and push a red button?
This is one of the most misunderstood areas of Part 40.
Yeah.
While the collector documents the event, they note exactly what time the driver arrived, what they said, and when they walked out on the paperwork. The employer often has the non-delegable responsibility to make the final legal refusal determination.
Wait, seriously? The clinic doesn't just check a box that says refusal, and then the DOT takes over the case.
The clinic checks a box on the CCF, noting the factual circumstances of what happened, but they do not make the legal determination for the employer.
That is fascinating.
Management must never casually accept a clinic employee saying on the phone, yeah, the driver refused. You, the employer, must gather the facts, check the specific Part 40 refusal provision, and document your decision based on the strict regulatory criteria.
So you really have to be an investigator.
You have to act as the compliance authority. For example, there is a massive difference between a driver who leaves the clinic before the testing process officially commences, like if they show up, see a long line, and leave before handing over their ID, versus a driver who leaves after the process has started.
Ah, so if they leave before it starts, is it still a refusal?
Under most DOT agency rules, for a random test, if the employee leaves the collection site before the testing process commences, it is not a refusal to test.
Interesting.
It might be a company policy violation for insubordination, but it's not a DOT refusal.
Yeah.
But if they hand over their ID, the collector starts the paperwork, and the driver walks out. that is a DOT refusal.
The line is that thin.
The line is microscopic, and you are responsible for knowing exactly where it is. If there is drama at the clinic, a shy bladder situation where the driver claims they physically cannot produce enough urine, a walkout, uncooperative behavior, you need to pause.
Take a breath.
Yes, you cannot react emotionally. You need to get the written documentation from the collector, open up the Part 40 rulebook, and see exactly whose responsibility it is to rule on that specific type of behavior.
Because there are different types of refusals, right?
Exactly. Sometimes the medical review officer handles the determination. For instance, if a shy bladder is caused by a legitimate medical condition, the MRO will evaluate the medical evidence and make the call.
Okay, that makes sense.
But behavioral refusals at the site, walking out, refusing to empty their pockets, that is on you, the motor carrier manager, to adjudicate and officially declare. You have to own that decision, and you must have a written, objective process for evaluating it, rather than just relying on hearsay from a frustrated clinic receptionist.
All right, everything we've discussed so far, the CCF, the MRO, the labs, the shy bladders, has leaned heavily toward drug testing.
Yeah.
But Section 382.105 covers the alcohol program too. And reading through the sources, it is clear that alcohol testing operates on an entirely different timeline, with a different physical procedure. And frankly, it creates a completely different psychological pressure cooker for the manager on duty.
It absolutely does. With urine drug testing, you have the luxury of time. You have days to wait for the specimen to travel to a lab, for the scientist to analyze it, and for the MRO to conduct their interview.
Right.
Alcohol testing is immediate. It happens right there, in real time, in the clinic. And because of that immediacy, the rules of engagement are completely different.
Let's break down the personnel first, because we aren't dealing with collectors and MROs in the alcohol world.
No, alcohol tests are conducted by specialized personnel. We're talking about STT screening test technicians, or bat's breath alcohol technicians.
BLATs. Got it.
And they are using very specific DOT-approved technology. They use approved screening devices, which can sometimes be saliva swabs or non-evidential breath testers, or they use evidential breath testing devices, which are highly calibrated machines that produce printed results.
And the core concept that fleet managers absolutely must grasp here is the critical difference between a screening test and a confirmation test.
This is a trap that catches many managers off guard because they are used to the drug testing process. Let's look at a common scenario.
Is this here?
A driver is pulled for a random alcohol test. They go to the clinic, the BT hands them a device, and they blow into it. That is the screening test. Let's say the digital readout comes up as a .025.
Okay, .025. Now, for an average citizen driving a Honda Civic home from dinner, .025 is well below the legal limit of .08. They're totally legal.
Correct.
But for a commercial motor vehicle driver operating under DOT regulations, .02 is a major trigger. So as a manager, if the clinic calls and says, hey, your driver just blew a .025, do I instantly terminate them?
Absolutely not. And if you do, you have violated Part 40.
Wait, really?
A screening result of .02 or greater is not a final actionable result. It simply acts as a trigger for a mandatory confirmation process. And Part 40 outlines incredibly strict procedural rules for how that transition from screen to confirmation must happen.
So what is the most critical rule in that transition?
The prescribed waiting period. When that screen hits .02 or higher, the BIT must instruct the driver to sit down and not eat, drink, put anything in their mouth, or belch.
Okay.
And they must wait a specific amount of time, usually a minimum of 15 minutes, before the confirmation test can be administered.
Why 15 minutes? What is the physiological reason behind that specific time frame?
The Department of Transportation relies on science to protect the driver. The DOT wants to ensure that the initial .025 reading on the screening device was actually measuring deep lung air, which indicates alcohol in the bloodstream, and was not simply caused by residual mouth alcohol.
Mouth alcohol, like if they just use Listerine.
Exactly. Yeah. Mouthwash, certain cough drops, breath spray, or even something they just ate or drank right before walking into the clinic can leave traces of alcohol in the mucous membranes of the mouth.
Ah, that makes sense.
This will spike a screening device. The 15-minute waiting period allows any residual mouth alcohol to naturally dissipate.
So what happens after the 15 minutes?
Then, and only then, a confirmation test is run, and this must be done on an evidential breath testing device, a highly accurate, calibrated machine that provides a printed result.
So what does this all mean for the dispatcher or safety manager sitting at their desk getting live updates from the clinic?
It means you must exercise extreme operational patience. You must never treat that initial screening result as the final result.
Don't jump the gun.
Right. If the clinic calls you and says, hey, the screen was 0.03, we're doing the confirmation now, you do not hang up the phone, pull the driver's keys, and process their termination paperwork.
You wait.
You wait. Because after that 15-minute waiting period, if the mouth alcohol is dissipated, the confirmation test might come back at 0.01.
And if the confirmation test is 0.01,
Under DOT rules, a confirmation test result of less than 0.02 is a negative test. The final result of that entire testing event is negative. The driver is clear to drive.
wow. So if you had fired them based on the 0.03 screen 15 minutes earlier,
You would have taken punitive action based on an invalid, unconfirmed preliminary result. Premature action based on a screening test is a massive violation of the procedural rights built into Part 40. You have to let the back-end code run its full sequence before you look at the user interface.
okay, we are getting toward the end of our deep dive here, but there is one more section of the source material we have to explore.
The landmines.
Yes, the landmines. And it covers something that rarely gets talked about in safety meetings until a civil rights lawyer gets involved. We are talking about the hidden administrative legal landmines that managers completely overlook when dealing with the paperwork between drivers and clinics.
And this goes back to the fundamental reality of what we are discussing today. Mandatory drug and alcohol testing is a highly regulated, federally mandated invasion of an individual's privacy.
Right.
The government is forcing an employee to provide bodily fluids to keep their job. Because of the severity of that constitutional intrusion, the DOT heavily protects the driver's rights throughout the process.
Let's talk about the first landmine, illegal waivers.
Yes, this is a big one.
I can picture this vividly. A carrier routes a driver to a brand new occupational health clinic they've never used before. The driver walks in, approaches the front desk, and the receptionist hands them a clipboard stacked with paperwork.
Standard operating procedure for a clinic.
Right. They say, okay, before we can do your DOT drug test, I need you to sign this general medical consent form, sign this waiver of liability saying you won't sue the clinic if you slip on a wet floor in the bathroom, and sign this indemnification agreement.
And that standard clinic operating procedure is strictly prohibited when it comes to federal testing. Yes. Under Part 40, employers, and by legal extension, the clinics acting as their service agents, are expressly forbidden from requiring an employee to sign a consent, release, waiver of liability, or indemnification agreement in order to participate in the DOT testing process.
I want to make sure I understand the why behind this. Is it because the federal mandate supersedes any private contract?
Exactly. Participation in the test is federally mandated for the driver to perform safety-sensitive duties. You cannot force a citizen to sign away their civil liberties or agree to a private corporate liability waiver just to comply with a federal law.
Now, that makes total sense.
The official DOT forms, the federal CCF and the DOT alcohol testing form, contain all the specific, legally authorized consent language required for the process. Nothing more can be demanded of the driver.
So what happens if a clinic insists? Let's say the receptionist says, sorry, company policy, if you don't sign our liability waiver, I can't test you. And the driver, knowing their rights, refuses to sign and leaves.
A poorly trained manager might look at that and say the driver walked out, that's a refusal to test.
Yeah, I'd probably think that.
But it is not. If a clinic turns a driver away because the driver refused to sign an illegal non-DOT waiver, that is not a DOT refusal by the driver. That is a regulatory violation committed by your service agent.
Wow.
And because the clinic is acting as your agent, that violation falls squarely back on you, the motor carrier. You failed to ensure your collection site followed Part 40.
That is wild. It means you have to proactively police the administrative habits of your vendors. You have to explicitly tell the clinic, do not hand my DMT drivers any paperwork other than the federal CCF.
You have to audit their procedures.
Which brings us to the final hidden landmine, and arguably the most common one in a busy trucking operation. Confidentiality breaches.
Oh man, I have seen this happen. Picture a bustling, chaotic trucking terminal on a Friday afternoon.
Always a Friday.
Always. A driver gets into a fender bender and gets sent for a post-accident test. The dispatcher is stressing out trying to figure out how to cover the rest of the driver's route.
The dispatcher is on the phone looking at a vendor portal, and they just yell across the dispatch room to the safety manager, hey, did Jimmy's post-accident drug test come back yet? Because I need to put him on the Chicago load tonight.
And that right there, that casual shouted question across an open office, is a massive breach of federal law.
Just by asking out loud.
Yes. These records are not just HR documents, they are highly sensitive medical data. Part 40 strictly limits how this information is transmitted, how it is used, and who is allowed to know about it. Results must go securely and directly to the DER.
The designated employer representative we talked about at the beginning.
Yes, dispatchers, immediate supervisors, load planners, or anyone without a legitimate regulatory need to know should never have casual access to this data.
Unless it stays locked down.
Exactly. If a dispatcher knows a driver tested positive before the driver has even had the required interview with the medical review officer, your internal corporate firewall is completely broken.
Because if that dispatcher starts treating the driver differently or gossip spreads through the terminal before the MRO has a chance to clear the result due to a valid prescription,
The liability is immense. It is a profound violation of the driver's privacy rights. The security of the data is just as important as the security of the urine specimen itself.
Okay, we have covered an incredible amount of ground today, all branching off from one single unassuming sentence in the federal regulations, Section 382.105.
We covered a lot.
We really did. We've covered CTPAs, the MRO process, the 15-minute mouth alcohol wait, and illegal waivers. As we wrap up, I want to synthesize the crucial questions from our source text into a rapid-fire self-audit.
I like this.
If you are a manager listening right now, think of this as your compliance gut check. Ask yourself these questions about your own operation.
These are the exact questions an FMCSA auditor will ultimately ask you.
Number 1, do you know exactly who your internal DER is, and do they understand their specific legal responsibilities regarding secure communication and immediate action?
Number 2, is your vendor, your CTPA, physically and administratively separating your DOT federal testing from your company's broader non-DOT zero-tolerance testing? Are the forms completely segregated?
Number 3, are the people actually collecting the physical specimens at your local go-to urgent care clinic truly Part 40 qualified, and do you have the training documentation on file to prove it if asked?
Number 4, do your frontline dispatchers and safety managers know the critical difference between an alcohol screening test and a confirmation test? Do they understand the strict rules governing the waiting period, or are they making premature termination decisions?
And finally, number 5, do you have a written, objective, legal process for how you handle a refusal to test situation, rather than just taking a frustrated clinic receptionist's word for it?
If the answer to any of those questions is, I don't know, your hidden architecture is cracking.
Yeah, that's not good.
The final takeaway here is profound but simple. Section 382.105 makes the procedure itself a non-negotiable part of your compliance program. You can no longer just ask your safety team, did we test the driver?
Right, that's not enough anymore.
That is the wrong question. You must train them to ask, was this test conducted under the correct DOT Part 40 procedure from beginning to end?
The chain of custody isn't just about the physical urine in the plastic cup. It is about the chain of regulatory responsibility. And as the motor carrier, you are the anchor holding that entire chain.
Exactly. And if the chain breaks anywhere, at the clinic, at the lab with the MRO, the anchor bears the weight of the failure.
Which leaves us with one final, slightly provocative thought to mull over as we close out.
Let's hear it.
Our source text mentioned that Part 40 is not a static document. It is actively evolving. It now includes provisions for oral fluid testing, which is a massive shift.
Huge shift.
This involves entirely new testing devices, completely different physical collection protocols, and new specialized laboratory capabilities.
It is a complete paradigm shift in how testing is conducted.
Exactly. So here's the thought to take back to your management team. If the federal regulations are already expanding to include complex new methodologies like oral fluids, the procedural burden on you, the manager, is only going to get heavier and more complex.
Oh, without a doubt.
If your company hasn't mastered the foundational, basic Part 40 chain of custody mindset right now with traditional testing, how on earth will your organization survive the legal liability of tomorrow's even more advanced, highly technical testing technologies?
It's a vital question. If your procedural foundation is cracked today, the complexity of the future will absolutely break it.
Something to think about the next time you look at that 80,000-pound truck and realize the whole massive operation is being held together by a tiny one-sentence regulation. Until next time, thanks for taking the deep dive with us.